Welcome to Under the Lens. Come and enjoy an extraordinary, raw, and unfiltered podcast that delivers debate, discussions, and interviews about film, pop culture, and everything in between. Here is your host, film critic and journalist, Byron Lafayette.
Today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different and going to be doing a ranking episode. And basically what this is we're going to be looking over a franchise and we're going to be ranking each of the entries in that franchise. We're going to be going over a little bit of details for each one. Nothing too long. This is probably going to be a shorter episode than we normally have on Under the Lens. But let's get into it. Today's episode is going to be focused on the Thin Man franchise. For those that are unfamiliar, this was a franchise of films that ran from the mid-1930s to the late 1940s. It starred Myrna and William Powell in the role of Nick and Nora Charles, a couple that basically were a crime-fighting, murder mystery-solving married couple. Nick Charles was a former police detective who had basically married Myrna Loy's character, Nora Charles. She was the daughter of a wealthy industrialist, and basically Nick Charles kind of retired and was helping her manage her businesses. But of course, he gets roped into all kinds of murder investigations and becomes quite famous nationwide as he solves each of these progressively more difficult crimes. Now, of course, as I said, there were 6 entries in this franchise. It was very popular. It kind of was it was a mix of a slapstick, comedy, witty dialogue, and also some really good mysteries in there as well. At the time, normally with those type of films, you had either, one aspect of the movie kind of trumping the other, so you either have, maybe a not so good mystery, but really good comedy, or the other way around. Now, where the Thin Man series excelled was that it did everything really well. It had fantastic performances. The cast had amazing chemistry. The mysteries were really good and, kind of kept you guessing as you watch. And they were hilariously funny. Lots of like slapstick, gags, but also just witty banter between Myrna Loy and William Powell. They had one of the best, I would say, if not the best, one of the best on-screen chemistries in cinema history. They were amazing. They crackled when they were together. And it's why there was so many films in this franchise. Now, of course, as it comes with any franchise, some films are better than others. And so we're going to be looking at the 6 Thin Man films, and I'm going to be starting at the bottom and then going up to the number 1. Some of the rankings on this list may surprise you if you're a fan of the franchise. I'm going to be doing this spoiler-free as well, so I'm not going to be disclosing, who the murderer was or anything like that. Because I know there is a lot of people who are, discovering this series every day. So I would say if you haven't seen these films, definitely check them out. They're really lighthearted. They're really fun. And they'll just put a smile on your face. And also, plot twist, the first Thin Man film is actually a Christmas movie. So this being December, it's actually the perfect opportunity to get into the franchise. So as I said, this is going to be a spoiler-free episode, so you can listen with no fear that it'll be spoiled. As I said, there will be no main mystery plot points discussed in this. This is going to be mostly just ranking the good and the bad of each film. So let's get started. At the bottom of the list is going to be the final Thin Man film, which was 1948's Song of the Thin Man. Now, when I say, this is the worst of the series, that's not necessarily, saying that this is a terrible, terrible motion picture, because even the worst Thin Man movie is better than most other mystery films at the time. It was just, it just, had a high bar when it came to this franchise. So as I said, this released in 48, and it of course starred William Powell and Myrna. The director who was known for this franchise had unfortunately passed away after I believe it was the fourth film. And so this was directed by Edward Buzzell. This was his first directorial film in this franchise. And, being the last one, it just, like I said, it just wasn't quite up to standard with the other ones. Now, it's not a bad movie. It has a decent mystery. The chemistry is still there between the William Powell and Myrna Loy. And just unfortunately, at this point, the franchise was just a little tired. And they unfortunately didn't bring in my opinion, the best type of writers that they could have. Because, as we get to another film in this series, you'll see that sometimes age of the franchise doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be bad. So, overall, this one is a fine entry. As I said, the mystery is not amazing, but at the end of the day, we're mostly watching this franchise for Nick and Nora and their interactions, and we still get a lot of good stuff with that. So definitely, it's worth checking out. If you're watching through the series, definitely watch it. Just don't expect, kind of the quality of story that was in the other ones. It is unfortunate that this was the last Thin Man, because they were intending to do more. The franchise was not intended to end with the sixth one, but this was the first Thin Man film to actually lose money. It earned $1.4 million in the US and Canada and $902,000 elsewhere, which resulted in a loss of $128,000. And $128,000 was a lot of money back in the 40s. So after that, since it lost money, the studio axed the franchise, and that was the end of the Thin Man series. So now going in at number 5 is going to be Shadow of the Thin Man. This was a film that was released in 1941, and it was directed by series mainstay S. Van Dyke. He was the one who brought these characters to life in the first place. And, overall, this is not a bad film. It's just, it doesn't have the magic that the other ones did. The interplay between Nick and Nora was good as always. We also got some fun scenes with their son as well. So we got to see a little bit more of their family. Just kind of where it wasn't quite as good was that the murder mystery that they were investigating was just a little bit bland. It just wasn't quite as interesting as the other ones. Because one thing that the Thin Man managed to do was each of its murder cases was interesting, for lack of a better term. They brought in, odd plot points, or the victim was kind of a strange person. One of the films had, an inventor, who had this mysterious invention he was trying to hide. Another, or it would have, suspects that were really, really kind of quirky, or, had strange motivations. Where unfortunately, when it came to Shadow of the Thin Man, it just felt more standard with your typical noir murder mysteries of the time in the 40s. That being said, it has a good third. The climax and the reveal of the killer is good. It's unexpected. You don't really see, in my opinion, the killer coming. I suspected it was somebody else. It's also great to see Sam Levine back as Lieutenant Abrams. He was a character from a previous film who was brought back as the investigator, and he played kind of the bumbling cop a little bit, and he's always fun to watch. So it was great kind of seeing old faces return. It just wasn't, it just wasn't the high watermark of the series. That being said, the film did earn 1.4 million in the US and Canada and 848,000 elsewhere, which resulted in a net profit of 769,000 for the series. This some interesting facts too about this was that Shadow of the Thin Man was actually very eagerly welcomed at the time because it had come 2 years after the previous outing, and it hit theaters just 2 weeks before the attack on Pearl Harbor. It would be 3 years before Myrna would make another film, which was The Thin Man Goes Home in 1945, as she left Hollywood to live in New York because she volunteered for the war effort with the Red Cross as an assistant to the director of military and naval warfare. So some interesting backstory to that one. So now moving on, we're going to move on to our fourth place. And that is going to be the film Another Thin Man. And this was released in 1939. This one was a lot of fun. It was, again, directed by W.S. Van Dyke. It was the third film in the series. And it was based on Dashiell Hammett's story, The Farewell Murder. And it was fun because it introduced the Charles' son, Nicky Jr., and he's a baby in this one, and it's a lot of fun. And funny enough, it was originally intended to be called Return of the Thin Man, but there was some controversy over that because what many people don't actually know is that William Powell's character of Nick Charles is not the Thin Man. The Thin Man was actually the murder victim from the first movie, and so they couldn't say Return of the Thin Man because they were like, well, the first Thin Man is dead. And so they had to say like, oh, another Thin Man, like another Thin Man case. And it's interesting because if you talk to most people today, they actually view William Powell as the Thin Man. I know I did when I first started watching these. So it's kind of interesting. But this story is one that I really like. It's interesting. Basically, you kind of see Nick and Nora are back in New York, and they're invited to spend the weekend in Long Island by this guy named Colonel McFay, who is basically the administrator of Nora Charles's fortune. And of course, all kinds of shenanigans happen. There's a murder they have to solve, and it's a lot of fun. It was interesting because it kind of took the action away from the big city for the first 2/3 of the movie. It, of course, returns it back to the big city in the third act where we get, our big climax. This one was also fun because it had some very quirky characters. We see a lot of people from Nick's time on the police, people that he sent to prison, or as they say in the film, sent me up the river. And, so it's very enjoyable. We also see the return of, it was Nat Pendleton as Lieutenant Guild from the first Thin Man movie. And it was always enjoyable seeing him again. I liked him in the first one. He kind of portrayed, this kind of tough, police investigator, but also a little bit bumbling, because that was kind of the shtick, so to speak, in like the comedy mysteries at the time, was that, the gentleman detective is brilliant, whereas the police are a little bit bumbling and kind of don't know what they're doing and have to rely on the detective. So we get a little bit of that in this. But overall, it's a great movie. The Rotten Tomatoes score is at 85%. And very rightfully so. Box office wise, this film totaled $2.2 million, with $1.5 million coming from the US and $700,000 from international. And it returned a profit of $394. So I apologize if before I said any of those numbers as millions. It should actually be thousands. So let's move on to the next. We're moving into a third place here. And third place is going to belong to the seminal classic, the first film in the series, and that is The Thin Man. This one was, again, directed by W.S. Van Dyke, was released in 1934 and spawned the franchise. Now, I want to reiterate here that just because this film is number 3 does not mean that it is not good or that it doesn't belong in the top. just for the sake of ranking, I had to put it at number 3. But this is a fantastic, fantastic story. The comedy is golden. The mystery is intriguing. It's funny. It's exciting. It's a little, it has some suspense and tension in there, especially when we see Nick Charles, going through this abandoned warehouse in the middle of the night, and it's also too, it was a pre-code film, but it's surprisingly clean. Actually, there's not really, a lot of scandalous things that you saw in some of the pre-code movies. That being said, even though William Powell and Myrna Loy, this was their first outing in the Thin Man franchise as these characters, their chemistry couldn't be better. It's a classic of the genre, and rightfully so. Looking at the box office for this particular one, it grossed 1.4 million, with 818,000 coming from the US and Canada and 605,000 in foreign, resulting in a net profit of 729,000, which is a lot of money back then. So this, of course, began and spawned the franchise. Kind of an interesting fact too about the trailer is that the trailer contains specially filmed footage in which we saw Nick Charles, of course, William Powell, seen on the cover of a Dashiell Hammett novel of The Thin Man. Nick Charles then steps out of the cover to talk to fellow detective Philo Vance, who was also played by William Powell in another franchise that he did about his latest case. And Nick Charles mentions that he hasn't seen Vance since the Kennel murder case, which is a film in which William Powell played a detective and was released in 1933. Nick Charles then goes on to explain to Philo Vance that his latest case revolves around a tall, thin man just before clips of the movie are shown. It's humorous and it's funny. And also, too, I would highly recommend you checking out the Kennel murder case. It's a really, really good noir murder mystery, very different than The Thin Man, but just incredible and very before its time with its camera angles and style of filming. I probably will do an episode eventually on that particular film because it's just so good. So now moving up towards the top of the list, we have in our number 2 spot, we have what is originally the 4th film, or I apologize, the 5th film in the series, which is The Thin Man Goes Home. And the thing is that The Thin Man Goes Home was released in 1945, and it has absolutely no business being as good as it ended up being for being the 5th film in a franchise. Normally, by the time a franchise is hitting its 5th installment, normally everybody's kind of on remote a little bit. They always say like, oh, they're cashing in the paycheck, and nostalgia and stuff. It's like, we think back to like the 5th Transformers movie, or, the 5th Pirates movie, which honestly, I still actually like the 5th Pirates movie. But, I will say, hey, it's not as good as the early ones. That being said, The Thin Man Goes Home, for me, it's the second best Thin Man story. And in some ways, I almost wish that The Thin Man Goes Home was the final film in the series, because there's so much good chemistry and a very good story, too, because we see Nick Charles going back to his hometown, and we find out that he grew up in this small, like Mayberry style town, that his father wanted him to be a doctor. He ended up going to become a policeman, and they kind of had a falling out. And so, this film is kind of about, Nick Charles trying to impress his father, trying to prove to his father that, hey, I didn't waste my life. I'm really good at what I do, and we see, Nora Charles, helping out to solve the crime. But we also see her, trying to support, her husband, Nick, and trying to boost him in the town, telling people, hey, this famous detective is here. Hey, he's solving this crime, and that a lot of the comedy in the film revolves around kind of some of the misunderstandings that happen. But it's really funny. It's interesting seeing Nick Charles interact with a lot of the people from his past. And, in a lot of ways, we kind of see, Nick and Nora Charles also kind of grown up a little bit, because they're kind of the high swinging couple in the first movie. They're like staying out all night drinking, and then getting right up to solve crime and stuff. And we see, they've slowed down a little bit in The Thin Man Goes Home, and they're a little bit, there's a little bit of comedy of like old married couple a little bit. And it's just it's really endearing, and it's funny, and it really kind of takes Nick Charles full circle a little bit. That he started his career in kind of the height of the 1930s, high society, New York, solving these crimes for the rich and famous. And then we kind of see him in this movie. He's back to Old Town Mayberry, solving a crime in his hometown, reconciling with his father. And by the time the credits roll, he's solved a great mystery in his town. He and his father are back on good terms again. And just, it feels like a natural end, honestly, to the franchise. And so, like I said, part of me does kind of wish that was the last film, just because it ends our characters on such good notes. So definitely check out The Thin Man Goes Home. It also has a little bit of a tie-in to World War II, obviously, because, this particular movie was released in 1945. And so there was that element kind of the wartime effort. And so it's kind of interesting to us to see that. It's not overt, it's not huge, it's not political or adding any of that like wartime propaganda that we saw a lot of, in the 40s. But, it is definitely there. This particular film earned at the box office almost 1.8 million in the US and Canada, and 1 million elsewhere, which resulted in a net profit of 501,000. Also interestingly enough, The Thin Man Goes Home was Myrna Loy's only wartime picture that she did, because she had been working, in the volunteer, sector for the war. Also too, the cocktail shaker, which was a staple prop, from previous films, because obviously the joke was Nick and Nora were always drinking. And, one person on Letterboxd even joked and said, like, the greatest mystery of this show is how Nick and Nora haven't died of alcohol poisoning yet. But in this particular movie, the cocktail shaker is not in this, and it's kind of replaced by this running gag about how Nick doesn't drink now because he doesn't want to offend his parents because they don't believe in drinking. And so he has this giant flask that he carries that contains only apple cider. And so he's like swigging apple cider throughout the movie. There's a lot of really funny moments due to that. But notes on the film said that this was due to, in an article actually from the Hollywood Reporter in 1944, that wartime liquor rationing was going on in the war. And so because of that, the producer of the film decided to eliminate the heavy drinking that had been seen as integral for Nick and Nora's daily life in the previous films, because they didn't want it to seem, like it was taking advantage of people, how people were giving up stuff for the war, and they didn't want it to seem like this high lifestyle was still going on. And so in a sense, it was like Nick and Nora were still, they were during the war, they were experiencing it with everyone else. So definitely, The Thin Man Goes Home is definitely the number 2 for me, and almost was number 1. But as you'll see, the number 1 film is coming up, and that is the second film in the franchise after The Thin Man. And this particular film was released in 1936, and it was directed by W.S. Van Dyke. And in my opinion, this was the high watermark of the series. It is an excellent, excellent film. It has a great comedy, great cast, a really, really good mystery, and a fantastic climax. Just overall, everything good about the Thin Man series is wrapped up in this film, and it is why it's over the first one for me, and even over The Thin Man Goes Home, because just everything meshes really well with our characters. This film also too famously stars in a supporting role, James Stewart, and he's really, really good in this. His character is just fantastic. Great actor, and he plays, and it kind of goes to his strength as an actor to show him playing opposite William Powell and Myrna Loy, and all their scenes together are just really good. They go together really well, because William Powell was a fantastic actor, because he could do drama, he could do comedy, I would say he's probably one of the best actors that we've had in Hollywood. And it's just an absolute shame that he's not better remembered today, because he was just absolutely fantastic. So, so definitely check out, After the Thin Man. It is just, like I said, if you enjoyed the first one when you saw it, just everything you liked is back in this one. And they throw in some extra stuff in there. And there's just some great laugh out loud moments in there with a lot of the characters. And we also see the first appearance in this one of Lieutenant Abrams, who does return in the later film, as I mentioned earlier. So it's kind of fun to kind of, you see him here and then you'll see him again later on. And the reception for this movie also was very, very good. That the film was nominated for an Oscar in 1937 for Best Writing and Screenplay. And it also has a 100% Rotten Tomatoes score. And both of those are completely deserved. It absolutely deserves a 100% score. I gave it 5 stars in my review. And also, it definitely deserved that nomination for screenplay Oscar, because it is just so snappily written with just great witty dialogue. So this film's worldwide total was 3.1 million, with almost 2 million coming from the US and Canada and 1.1 million coming from elsewhere. And it turned in a profit of $1.5 million, which in the 1930s was incredible. It also spawned an hour-long radio adaptation of After the Thin Man, which was presented by CBS's Radio Theater. And William Powell and Myrna reprised their roles for this, which was not uncommon for back then. So basically that completes the ranking of the Thin Man episode, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't checked out this series, highly recommend it. It is available right now if you want to see them for free, and you have an HBO Max subscription. 5 of the films are available for streaming on there. The only one that is not available is The Thin Man Goes Home, but that one is available to rent on Amazon Prime, and I believe it was only like $2.99 to see. So definitely, check out the films on HBO Max, and then, if it's still unavailable, rent The Thin Man Goes Home, because it's definitely one that you don't want to miss if you're going through the series. So, definitely like and subscribe Under the Lens. Tell your friends about it. I hope you enjoyed the episode. We're going to have a couple of more episodes coming before the end of the year, and then we have a lot of exciting plans for 2023. We have some new series coming within Under the Lens that I think you guys are going to really enjoy. And I hope you guys have a Merry Christmas and a Happy Holidays.